Time now for our Road to the Open segment to continue. We go back to 2002, one of the most talked about Australian Opens in our lifetime.
Without doubt.
Al and Hazy, for a lot for the right reasons, unfortunately some of it for the wrong reasons at Victoria. And the man that eventually won that tournament, which was reduced to 3 rounds, of course, back in 2002, was Steve Allan. And he joins us from over in the US of A, where he's preparing to play in the first of the PGA Tour events for the year. And it's great to have you on Inside the Ropes, Steve. Thanks for joining us, mate.
No worries, guys.
And I should say for the season, not for the year, of course. 2002, we go back to the Victoria Golf Club, the Australian Open that you won. What do you think about first, your triumph or the controversy that sort of befell that tournament?
Definitely winning. I mean, it's the highlight of my career, winning, my national Open, and it was at home. At the time I was literally living 5 minutes from Victoria, and my family were there, most of my friends. It was a great week for me.
I understand why people talk about that incident, Andy and Stevie. I just put it on the record now that my thoughts on this are: has thrown up a champion who holds the Stonehaven Cup just about as dearly as anyone who's ever won it, and has carried it. I don't think you've missed one, Stevie, since, and I just think you always make an effort to come back, and it does play a huge role in your life, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It was. I'd been playing well that year without having any great results, but I actually remember when I heard that the tournament was going to be at Victoria. Playing state golf in Victoria. When I first turned pro, we had the Vic Open at Victoria. We had the Australian PGA at Victoria. So I really knew the course well and I loved it. And when the Open was held there, I really looked forward to playing it. And I was a little fortunate in that that year I just scraped into the top 150 on the PGA Tour, which meant I didn't have to play the second stage. Otherwise, I would have missed the Open. And so maybe it was meant to be. I snuck in. I think I was 149th. I was playing well at the end of the season. I got back to Australia a week before. The greens were rock hard. I had a practice round out there with Jeff Ogilvy, the week before, and the greens were already... You could tell there was going to be some issues because they were already brown on the Friday before. But, I had a week to get back used to sandbelt golf and the firmness of the greens, and I played well. I was working on some good things with Lynchy at the time, and it all came together.
Steve, it's hard enough to win an Australian Open as an Aussie, at the best of times. How did the controversy of that week factor into your, I guess, your game plan, but also the way that you handled all of the pressure in what was a pretty all-star cast that week?
Yeah, it was a really good field. I mean, I think barring sort of at the time, like, Norman and Elkinson, I think all the other good Aussies were there, and we had Charles Howell and obviously Rich Beam, who was the PGA, the US PGA champion. So the controversy really didn't. It was a talking point, but it really didn't enter into my game plan. I mean, the game plan was there because the first day, if we had kept playing, it would have been extremely difficult. So you would have been really, really grinding and really just trying to make pars and not rack up big numbers. But once that was over, it was more about just trying to play, and the course was perfect after that. I think they fertilised it and watered it, and really the way the course was on Friday, it was the way it should have been on Thursday, and it would have got a little firmer during the week, and it would have been a perfect Melbourne setup. But so really the controversy didn't play into it. It was just a matter of getting on with it and really trying to play well.
We'll get away from this in a second, Steve, but just before we do, there were two things I wanted to ask you about that. One is that your position on the course, I think you were immediately behind the flash point. You're on the second or maybe even the third tee when all hell broke loose on the third, but also in, as you are now sort of in some way defending your claims to the title, which is, I think, ridiculous.
It's unnecessary.
Yeah. You rightly point out in a subsequent story you did with Martin Blake that, you went through all the rigours of a champion and stood on the first tee on the last day nervous and had to fight off a fantastic field. There's no asterisk next to it in your opinion, is there? Yeah, no, not at all. I think if I had, if I'd have been leading on Saturday night and the last day got washed out, well, I'd be happy to take the asterisk. But, it like you said, the hardest thing to win in golf is to be there and go through the last day. And, sadly, I haven't done that at other times in my career, but just that week I did. And what was your recollection? Because so it was Bob Shearer and Mark Allen up on the third green. They called out the tour officials and the AGU officials at the time to sort out what was going on, and there was a threat of a walk off from the players. And you were only 200 or 300 metres from that flash point.
Yeah, I was. I'd hit my drive on the third. I think I was in the left rough, and I saw some hands going up in the air as if to say what's going on. And we knew the course was on the edge, so it didn't completely surprise anyone. But and they took a long time. I think they might have even watered with the thought of continuing. But I walked up there and listened to them, and I think it was Richard Ball was playing with Bob and Mark, and he chipped up, and they'd all said good shot. Thought the ball had stopped a couple of feet short of the hole, and as they walked onto the green, it started rolling back to the front. And his next putt or chip, I'm not sure, went past the hole, and so now he's got a putt straight back down the hill, and that went straight off the front. And they were a little bit a bit annoyed, but I think there was a few spots on the course that were the same things were going to happen. I heard one of the greenkeepers tell me at the time that Channel 7 might have gone to a break with Peter Leonard on the green, and they came back and he was in the bunker. So I think maybe on a few holes, I think there might have been some issues as the day went on, because that was only 2 or 3 holes into the afternoon round, so we had 4 or 5 hours worth of golf with only firmer and faster conditions coming.
And I understand, Andy and Ellie too, that Stuart Appleby had just 5-putted the 13th. I'm pretty sure that's not in Stuart Appleby's kit bag as a rule. So, there were some horrendous things going on.
Yes, there were.
So you shoot 66-64, Steve, the next 2 rounds, and you stand in that final group on the final day knowing what was in front of you. All these years later, can you remember how jangly your nerves were and how excited, from a really positive sense, I imagine, how excited you were going into that final round?
Yeah, I do. I was nervous, but I think I was confident, and I remember setting a goal. Obviously, you want to win, but my goal at the start of the day was just to play well and really control what I could control. And a couple of times that day, I've got a habit of getting ahead of myself when things are going well, and getting excited. And a couple of times that day, it did happen. I got off to a good start. I birdied the first. Rich bogeyed, so I was a couple ahead of him, and I wasn't sure of what other guys were doing, but I played really solidly without anything else happening, and I got around to the 7th hole, and I looked up, and I was 2 ahead still, and I hit it close on 8, but missed the putt, and then bogeyed the par 5 9 to be back into a tie for the lead, which was obviously disappointing, because I was close enough on 8 that I could have stretched it to 3 with the par 5 coming up, and I did let the thoughts get into my head, and I got ahead of myself, but both times in that day, I was able to really calm down and really just refocus on just playing well and hitting good shots. And, I birdied 11 and 12, and I kind of did the same thing. All of a sudden, I think I was 3 ahead, which, 2 holes before I was tied for the lead, and now I'm 3 ahead. And as a result, I hit a pretty weak putt on my first putt on 13, and I 3-putted. But again, I was able to just sort of calm down and really focus on what I had to do. And Rich held a long putt on 14, and I followed him in, which was, in the end, the difference. And I played a little conservatively over the last few holes. I love that finishing stretch at Vic. 15 is possibly my favourite short par 4 in the world, and I nearly always go for it with driver. But on that day, with a 2-shot lead, I'm not bringing a double into play, and I think I hit a 6-iron off the tee. Hit a pretty good shot into 16, but again kept it below the hole. Hold a nice little 3-footer for par, and I didn't play the last 2 holes particularly strong. Didn't hit good drives, but sort of good fairway bunker shots, and then I hit a really good long putt on 18. I hit a pretty weak pitch. Barring Rich Hole and another bomb from the back of the green, I knew that a par was going to be enough, and my pitch wasn't really very good. Left me a tricky putt across the green, but I was rolling the ball well all week, and I had good feel for the speed, and I just triggered it down there.
Steve, you talk about, the way that you manage a final round, and it's something that I think we should potentially talk to more after people have won big events, especially in their home countries. But what kind of strategies did you use, out there during the final round? I know Kari Webb used to shut her eyes and try and listen to all the birds and try and pick birds out of trees around her just to try and stay in the moment. Did you have anything like that you had in place at the time? Because it was almost right on the cutting edge of sports psychology coming into golf around about 2002.
Yeah, I didn't have anything particular that day. It was really just about trying to play well. I really told myself I just wanted to play well and do my best. But, I've used those sort of little tricks at times, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I think, a couple of them are like like Curry, listening to the birds, listening to the sounds that you can hear. Just obviously at times deep breathing is good and to really relax. Sometimes it's like totally switching off from golf when you're walking up the fairway, thinking about something else. But I think those things can be very individual, and like I said, sometimes they seem to really work, and other times they haven't. I've had a couple of pre-shot thoughts that have really helped in my career at different times, and they work amazingly for a while, and all of a sudden that same thought doesn't seem to work, and it's hard to put your finger on sometimes.
Yeah, it's exactly the same with swing thoughts sometimes as well, isn't it? But in terms of, final rounds, I think it's something we don't talk about enough. A lot of it comes down to decision making. You're always going to make execution errors, aren't you? But when you say that going down the stretch you chose to play more conservatively, it's something that I think a lot of our listeners can relate to in terms of their pennant matches, their Saturday comps. Did you play conservatively aggressively to conservative targets, or did you really just reel back?
I think I was pretty nervous there at the end. I mean, I think I was probably more nervous hitting a 6-iron off the 15th than I would normally when I'm standing there hitting a driver, because it's just not something you do, and it's hard sometimes to focus on that layup. Like you said, you hit a 6-iron into the pin, you've got a specific spot, and on that hole particularly, you just wanted to get it on the fairway. So I probably don't think on that particular shot I was probably very good with my mental thought. But at the end of the day, it was a 6-iron, so I managed to get it on the fairway, and I hit some good shots coming in. I think that is key, to have an aggressive swing towards a conservative target. But again, because sometimes some players aren't conservative by nature, so I think the difference when they try to play conservative, it doesn't come naturally. So I think it takes some work sometimes. I think it's something that you have to be ready to do in lots of situations, really. I mean, anytime you're in contention, you've got decisions coming down the stretch, but most of the time, the best thing you can do is play as well as you can for the day. Because, for example, on that hole, if I'd gone for it and messed it up, well, most of the time I'd be happy to take that risk on that hole, because it's the risk of making an eagle, an easy birdie, as compared to a wedge, which is still a tricky wedge and a tricky green. But you have to be ready to do that and play conservatively or aggressively. And the finish at Vic with 2 par 5s is a pretty good example of that. I think more so are some of the holes with water. When you get to the last hole, you want to know where you stand from that situation. But before the last couple of holes, you really just should play as well as you can, I think. And I think the key thing is to feel comfortable with the shot. There's times that you might be aggressive and think that the shot, people watching might think the shots are, what is he doing? That's silly. But if you're really comfortable with it, you've got to be bold sometimes to win. So I think the key is to really be comfortable with what the shot you're doing, the shot you're preparing to play.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, because Robert Allenby, a few groups ahead of you, had absolutely made a meal of the 15th, drove it into the bunkers left and had 3 in the sand and made a bomb of a putt for a 5, which when he derailed himself there, unfortunately. I wanted to take you back to the 11th, Stevie, if you don't mind, and 12th actually in particular. You hit a fantastic approach into 11 green, made the birdie. And then in the walking commentary, the incomparable Paddy Welsh is describing Rich Beam's decision on the 12th tee now to take a driver and take on the bunker on the right corner. He's been trying to outmuscle the course all day. You take a metal 2 wood, 2 metal, whatever you want to call it these days, and knock it down the left into that wide open space between the 12th and 13th fairways, just playing your own game. How important was it to, not get caught up in the USPGA Champions style, and also for you to see the sort of, trouble that he was generating by being aggressive? Yeah,
I think in that particular case, I knew the course well enough that yardage off that tee gave you, if you hooked it, you were going to be fine. And that was one of those holes I pretty much would play that like that all the time. You'd hit that shot, you'd try and hit the fairway. Those bunkers on the right were really tricky. You just did not want to be in those up against the lip. So if anything, I would always favour the left. And I think from memory, I sort of overhooked it a little bit, but there was never any trouble out there. So I remember taking a bit of time to get the line on the second shot, and I was, pretty comfortable with it. Like I said, I played Vic so often at the time that I knew the course, really well. And I think the shot in on 12 was one of my best ones for the week. I think it was a 7-iron from memory, but I knew I hit it well. I hit it right where I wanted to, and walking over the hill and getting down there, and it was only 3-4 feet away. It was good.
So you said before, just before that bit that Hazy took you back to, Steve, you said before that, what happened on 8 and 9, you had got, you allow yourself to kind of get ahead of yourself in the round. Can you remember what happened when you do get ahead of yourself? Can you remember what that sounds like in your own head, what that actually looks like?
I think it's just a case of you don't then really fully get into the shot that you're on because your mind's just not quite, and it's really subtle. It's one of those things that sometimes it can start to happen before you really even know it's happening.
Yeah.
But when you look back, you're like, that wasn't that hard a shot. Why would I have done that, and why did I do that? And the big thing for the Australian Open for me is I had a couple of chances of my career to win good tournaments before then. I'd won in Germany. I'd had a chance in Dubai, and that was one of those ones I went for it on the last, and I hit it in the water in Dubai, but I don't regret it at all. I just didn't execute the shot well. But at different times when I got in contention, I definitely, I got a bit excited. And after the Australian Open, I actually really thought I'd got on top of it. The day that I was able to really, next time I'm going to be up there, I'm going to be good, and I'm going to, be able to handle it and not get ahead of myself. And I didn't. Unfortunately, I had a chance to win in Milwaukee on the PGA Tour, and that was one of those times I really could have won just as easily as lost. But I probably just lost my focus a little bit because I thought I was chasing Kenny Perry all day. I'd made a lot of birdies. Every time I made one, he made one. I kept being one behind. And I birdied the 14th, and I looked up, and all of a sudden I was 3 in front because my birdie had happened when he made a triple. And it completely shocked me because I didn't expect to have to play the last 4 holes from 3 in front. And I didn't play poorly coming in, but there was 2 par 5s, and I didn't make a birdie, and I hit one bad tee shot on 17, and I think it definitely, I wasn't ready for it, and it just threw me off that little bit. And then he had a hot finish and ended up beating me by a shot. So, looking back, I learned a lot from winning the Australian Open, but I learned just as much from losing at Milwaukee the next season, or a couple of seasons' time. I think the next season.
Yeah, you raise a really good point, Stephen, that a lot of being in contention truly is trial and error in so many ways. Did you experiment? You mentioned that you weren't prepared to play the last 4 holes 3 ahead. Did you have, throughout other events that you were in contention, did you experiment with not looking at leaderboards and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have actually, and it helped me quite a few years later. I had a little good run at the end of the season in, I think, 2008, and I played at it was actually Dustin Johnson's first tournament win in upstate New York in the fall series, and I didn't look at a leaderboard all day and ended up coming third. And I didn't really play that well, but I just hung in there and I did as well as I could in the day, and I didn't look at a leaderboard until I was in the bunker, greenside on 18, and I knew I needed to get up and down to tie Matt Goggin, and I looked at it like that was motivation to get it up and down and come third. And a couple of weeks later, I was playing at Greyhawk and was playing quite well again, and had a chance going into the last day. And I made the point of not looking at the leaderboard, but my game was getting a little bit scruffy, and I could tell I'd dropped off. And I actually looked at the leaderboard to try and give myself a little bit of a G up and say, "Listen, you're not doing that bad. You can get back in this," So I think that's one of those things that's got to be a personal preference. Someone like Tiger clearly knew where he stood and knew what the leaderboard was saying and knew what he had to do, whereas other people, I think, it would have, no doubt in Milwaukee, if I had not looked at the leaderboard and been able to just play those last 4 holes, I'd like to back myself to have played them better and won the tournament. But, you try to learn from these things and hopefully improve.
So go back 4 years before you win your Australian Open, and you beat a really good field in the German Open, another national Open, over in Europe in '98. Can you remember how you got it done there?
Yeah, that was a little bit. That was kind of amazing, that one, actually. I started the last day. I think I was 4 shots behind Ignacio Garrido, but only 1 behind second place. So at that point, I'd never won a tournament. If I could get second, it would be a great week for me. And obviously, being 4 behind Ignacio, it's all up to him if he has a good day. And I started off playing fantastic. I got it to about 4 under through 12, and I made a triple on the 13th. I think it was a par 3, if I've got my holes correct. And that was that kind of shocked me and stunned me, and I managed to make a par on the next hole, and a little bit the same. I'd sort of given myself, well, you still only 1 out of second now. Let's try and finish second. It'll still be a great week. And I rolled a putt in the very next hole, which, you know, I got to 1 back, I think, after my birdies. Triple made me 4 back. I rolled in a putt, and I looked up at the leaderboard there, and Ignacio had doubled the same hole that I tripled. So now all of a sudden I'm only 1 behind again with 3 to go, and I birdied 16, parred the last 2, and he and I think it was Mark Rowe as well, the Englishman, they both bogeyed 17. All of a sudden I'd won. So that was a crazy back 9.
Geez, your memory's really fading, Stevie. I can't believe you're struggling to recall all those shots, mate.
Well, you know, if I'd won a few more tournaments, I might be. Well, you've only got 2 under the belt. So
2 more than us,
mate. I just, some might say that you coulda, woulda, shoulda stayed in Europe and plied your trade there, but I put it to you now that you've got your beautiful wife Bridget and your kids there, Liam, Joey, Zach. That US has have been a great call for you in other in other aspects of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't regret leaving Europe. I mean, I think, growing up, you always wanted to play on the best tour in the world, and I came over, and I certainly haven't achieved what I would have liked to, but I had my chances, and maybe that a couple of those moments, things could have been, I could have got going a little bit better if I'd come through a couple of times. But no, I don't regret it. I mean, I really enjoyed Europe, and it's a great tour with a lot of good experiences. I mean, a lot of different countries, a lot of different cultures. Obviously a lot of travel. But once I had my kids, I mean, the US is, it's pretty much home now where the family is, and so I don't regret coming over here at all.
We should let you go in a second, mate. Let you tend to that blinker in the background.
You've been turning left for a long time.
Mate, I just wanted to ask you a couple about where you are at the moment. It hasn't been your greatest year. I think you'd say that straight up, but, you've still got the fire in the belly. Am I right in saying you Monday qualified for the Safeway Open?
Yeah, I did. I had a poor year on the web.com. I didn't play particularly well, and when I started hitting the ball well, I putted poorly, and it just the web schedule is pretty funny. We play not very many tournaments in a row at the start of the year, so it's very sporadic, and you play 1, have a couple of weeks off, and then play 2, and then all of a sudden you've got 12 out of 13 weeks, and you need to be playing well, and I didn't play well, and I never really quite got on top of it, and so I have to go back to the Q school to get back on the web, and I took the opportunity to come over here and play Monday qualifier. I played a mini tour event a couple of weeks ago. I was planning on playing another one maybe in a couple of weeks just to keep sharp until the Q school, and then in between second stage and finals, the Australian Open's on, and so plan on coming down for the Open, and maybe even hopefully the New South Wales Open the week before.
And where does it sit, just before we do let you go? I mean, in terms of when you sort of set out as a young pro with stars in your eyes, just sort of finishing where we started, where did the Australian Open sit for you, Steve, in terms of the things that you hope that you might be able to achieve as a professional player?
I think it's pretty high up there. I think it would be hard to say. Obviously, the 4 majors and probably the players stand above everything else. And then if you had to pick a title to win, I think that would be the one that I would pick. Obviously, winning on the PGA Tour would be worth a lot more financially and set your career up. But I think a lot of those guys, I think pretty much if you could ask, Bads or, Stuart, Robert, Jeff, Adam Scott, I don't think they'd swap their Australian Opens for another, regular PGA Tour win. So it was pretty high up there. I remember the first one I went to was the 86 Open at Metropolitan, watching Roger Davis win, and I think as a kid I went to every one in Melbourne after that, and it was they're great experiences watching those guys when you're growing up playing the Australian Open. Obviously the Masters was huge back then too, but there's something about your national title that was a little bit more prestigious, I think.
Well, it's one of those tournaments that people, for one reason will always look back at and, have that conversation about, but they'll always come back to the fact that your name's engraved on the trophy at the end of the day for winning and beating everybody else. And as Ali and Hazy said, it was a really strong field that you knocked
Sure
over
was.
that year, and you should be unbelievably proud of what you're able to achieve. I'm sure you are, and you don't need us to be telling you that. Great news, you're going to be coming down to the Australian later this year. We can't wait to see you do what you're going to do there and everything in between and thereafter, Steve. Thanks for joining us on Inside the Ropes. We really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers, Steve.
Steve Allan, the 2000